Hello, fourth graders. So today we're going to continue our discussion on the Southwest in Chapter 5. But today we're going to start Chapter 5, Lesson 5, How does the Southwest contribute to the global science community? And if you look at the image on the right, you can see there is I want to say spaceship, but space shuttle would probably be the better term, which is leaving from New Mexico. I know that some of you are working on your projects, and yes, at the end of this chapter, we do have our projects, which we'll go over at the end of the standards. And just think about your state and what you think your state has contributed to the science community. So when we say the science community, we're talking about the United States and even the world of how they have helped science grow. Maybe in your state, the one that you're researching, they have a space base. Maybe in your state, they have a special museum dedicated to science. Based on the information that you read inside the text and from your research, see if you can find anything interesting. So, in this lesson, you're going to be learning about the Southwest and how it helps support space research and exploration. You're going to be talking about it at the end of it, so that's how you'll know that you understood everything. If you can explain it back, if you can tell it to someone else and use your own words, then that's how you know you've learned it. And this way, you'll be able to figure out how each state contributes to the United States. That way, you understand that each state has their own specialties. The same way that we talked about the Midwest in the previous chapter, these states have their own specialties too. So let's get started. Here you can see that we've got a space shuttle leaving the Earth, and it says it's in White Sands Missile Base in New Mexico. And it says this is an ideal location for space shuttle landings. Why do you think an area like this might be ideal for space shuttle landings? What do you think is special about this area that you think might not necessarily be everywhere else? We talked about the environment of the Southwest, so I want you to definitely look at what's special here. Do you see a lot of trees in this area? Do you see a lot of grass? Is there snow on these mountains in the background? What do you see? Observe. These are all clues to telling you why this area is important. Let's get started on the first page. We are on page 234 with the title as The Space Race. Before we get started, make sure that you read the inspect portion, which tells us what we're going to be looking for. So first, we're going to read the article, figure out why the formation of NASA was an important step to the space race, and what does NASA stand for. We're going to figure out the number of events in the space race. So if there were 1 or 2, maybe there were 5, maybe there were 10. And you're going to underline the accomplishments made by the United States in the space race. So obviously, in this little question area, it's telling you that the United States is going to make accomplishments in this space race. Now let's figure out who else was in the space race. And of course, if you want to write down any notes for answering this question right here, why was the formation of NASA an important step in the space race? You can write them right here. If you want to take notes while you're reading through this for answers on the next page, you can definitely write them here as well. The space race. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first man-made satellite. It was called Sputnik 1, and its launch marked the start of the space age. The Soviet Union's success worried and embarrassed the government of the United States. It meant the United States had fallen behind in space exploration and technology. So here we have the Soviet Union, and if you already know what the Soviet Union is, fantastic. But not everyone does, and that's okay. So the Soviet Union is what we now call present-day Russia. Before, Russia was a larger country, and it was a combination of other countries put together that we now have as separate. So countries like Slovakia, or depending on where or when, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, all of those countries used to be part of the former Soviet Union. And at this time, they had launched their first satellite, or their first man-made satellite, but the US hadn't yet. So the US wanted to compete with them. To fix this, Congress established the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, in 1958. As an arm of the federal government, NASA's responsibility is to coordinate US activities in space. In 1961, NASA opened the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, Texas. The facility is now called Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center. It is home to the human space flight operations. So now we already have a state, Houston, Texas, that we know that NASA created their first spacecraft center, and now we know what NASA means. So the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. To further show the nation's commitment to the space program, President John F. Kennedy presented a challenge in 1961. He challenged the nation not only to go to the moon, but to do it before any other country, and to do it in just 10 years. The effort continued the space race. I want you to think for a second, who exactly issued that challenge? Yes, we have many challenges today that we see online, but this one was a little different. This one is asking everyone to work together to help the United States get better. On July 20, 1969, America's Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon. Apollo 11's astronauts became the first humans to walk on the moon. The United States took the lead in the space race and lived up to President Kennedy's challenge. Now we have an event. July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 landed on the moon. So over here, make sure that you are numbering the events in the space race. If you want to number them through a little mark of 1 beside each date, you can definitely do that. So here could be 1, down here could be another one, because 1958. In 1961, that's when you know they opened the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center. That could be your 3rd one. And then, of course, President John F. Kennedy's challenge, a 4th one right there. A 5th one could be Apollo 11's landing on the moon. And that would be all of the events in the space race on this page, at least. If you find another one, let me know. And make sure that you underline the accomplishments the United States made. So anything the United States did that they were the first to do, that would definitely be an accomplishment. Here we're going to read the caption on this image. In 1962, during a speech in Houston, Texas, President John F. Kennedy outlined America's goal of sending astronauts to the moon. Let's read the find evidence. Reread. Why do you think the United States was so concerned about the Soviet Union's success with Sputnik I? Circle the words that tell you how members of the US government felt. Underline some things that the US government did about it. And if you're back in class, then you can definitely talk about what was President Kennedy's role in the space race. What did he do? How did it affect NASA? So now you have more questions over here that you can even find and write your answers over here. For what is your logic? What do you think could be a reason why they wanted to be the first going to space, going to the moon? Why do you think that the United States wanted to compete? Do you think that it was just to see who could do it first? Do you think that maybe there was a plan? Do you think that if they were doing it for a reason, what could that reason be? And of course, circle any words that you think say how the US government felt about it. So if the US government says we didn't like this challenge, then you could definitely circle that. Over here, it talks about Congress establishing the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. So if they created a whole branch of government, do you think that they like this challenge? Or do you think that they didn't like this? So those are things that you should definitely look at. And of course, underline some things that the US government did about it. Let's read a primary source by John F. Kennedy. We chose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. And he said this at Rice University, September 12th, 1962. Let's move on to the next page. We are now on page 236, and we're going to get started on the explore, problem, and solution. We've done these before, so this is definitely not the first time. So let's go over the instructions in order to understand the problem and solution. Text can be structured around the problem and the solution to the problem. The beginning of the text will describe the problem. The solution can sometimes be something that has already fixed the problem, or something that the writer is proposing, which means is suggesting their idea of what could fix the problem. To understand the problem and solution, first we have to read through the text all the way through, which is something that we've already done. The reason why we do this is to help make sure that you understand what the text is even about. The second thing we have to do, look for an issue or problem that's being described. A problem and an issue both mean the same thing. So we're going to look for a problem that they're talking about inside the writing. Are there words that indicate a problem, such as challenge or hardship? This is when we use our context clues. We've talked about this in English, where we look for clues that tell us what's going on inside the story or what's going on to the text. Third thing we have to do, identify how the issue is resolved or the challenge is overcome. So the third thing we have to do is figure out how the issue is fixed or how they got through it. And the last thing you have to do is find the relationship between the solution and the problem. Did a person or industry's actions solve the problem described at the beginning? So make sure that when you're saying that this is a solution, it actually connects to the problem. If you say something along the lines of, it was raining yesterday, and then you say that the solution was maybe we went in the car, those two things are not connected. But if you say it was raining yesterday, so we use the windshield wipers in the car, that would show that it's connected. That's how you're solving the problem, which is that you can't see because of the rain. So here we have a sample one already ready for us. Who is the person that we're talking about, or the group that we're talking about? In this case, the United States. The problem that the United States had. First, take a second, pause, think about it. What was the previous page about? What were the issues that the United States was trying to challenge? What do you think that the United States was trying to fix? Once you have an idea, then you can definitely check your answer. Because based on the previous pages, which we just went over, the United States had fallen behind in the space exploration and technology race. This is before Elon Musk. This is before the Virgin Airlines airplane that goes into the atmosphere. And this is before all of that. This is even before the Mars rover. So you have to remember, this is a long time ago. None of those things had existed yet. Sending things to Mars, sending satellites, those things hadn't existed yet. So you have to take that into consideration. Make sure you think about that. So we know that the problem is that the United States fell behind in the space race. How did the US fix that problem? Make sure that you show your answer using your text. So think about how the US fixed that problem. We just read a paragraph talking about how the US saw that they were behind and they said, we're not going to stay behind. We want to do better than that. We want to see how far we can go. One way that they decided to fix the problem was John F. Kennedy saying that he wanted to have a man on the moon or win the space race within the next 10 years. That's a possible solution. Another possible solution was that they created NASA in order to get someone on the moon in 10 years. And the third thing that they did that was definitely a solution is that they actually got a successful trip to the moon, which we can see right here. On July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11's mission landed on the moon. But don't forget, Apollo 11 didn't just land there automatically on its own without help, without all of these other steps happening first. First, this step happened, then this one, talking about Congress creating NASA, then John F. Kennedy creating his speech. You can even see it by the years, 1958, 1961, and of course, 1969. Right when the 10-year gap was almost done, there was only 2 more years left, and it would have been 10 years. So for your solution, NASA being created, John F. Kennedy's speech, and Apollo 11's successful mission to the moon, all are your solution. So make sure that you fill up that graph and you have your neatest handwriting. If you're typing it out, make sure that it is clear and that we can see your pages. We're going to get started on page 237 using the exact same format, but this time we're going to figure out our own who's. So we have 5 options here, okay? You're going to figure out 5 problems that they faced, and of course 5 solutions to those problems. Inside your text on pages 282 to 289, that's where you're going to see the different who's, the different problems, the different solutions, but there won't just be 5, there'll definitely be more than 5. These are just places for you to mention at least 5 that interest you, and then write them down here. So make sure you have your textbook out if you're following along with your textbook. If you're not, you can read along with me, and let's get started. All right, so don't forget, we're looking for 5 who's, we're looking for 5 problems, and we're looking for 5 solutions. So keep that in mind while we go through this text. We're on page 282 in your textbook. How does the Southwest contribute to the global science community? Same topic as before, and now we've got a huge crater on our right. Let's get started. The Southwest sun and sky. The climate and conditions of the Southwest make it a perfect place to study the solar system and the stars beyond. Some areas in the Southwest are so dark at night that it's easy to see into space here. That's easier to see to space here than in many other places. Since it has very little light pollution, the desert is one of these places. The dry, clean desert air also makes it easy to see into the sky. If you know what light pollution is, you can go ahead and leave a comment. If not, and you want to research what light pollution is, I will definitely give you extra credit for that, because light pollution is something that prevents you living in a city from seeing stars, even if they're right above you. Because of all the light coming off of Earth, it kind of reflects on our atmosphere, and so we can't see that far into space unless there's no other lights around. And that's why sometimes the best place to see stars are on top of mountains or in places like the desert, where you can't, or there's not much light because there aren't many people living there. Clear nights of dazzling stars have always made people in the Southwest wonder what was beyond our planet. These conditions also allowed them to track the movement of the stars and the sun. Today, this fascination continues as the Southwest region leads the way in scientific research. Scientists here study astronomy, space travel, and how our planet and its people interact with the universe. In the high, flat plain between Flagstaff and Winslow, Arizona, lies a gigantic crater. This bowl-like pit plunges 600 feet deep and measures 4,000 feet across. The dry climate of the area means that the crater has changed very little since it was made. And so, here we have the Meteor Crater National Landmark in northern Arizona. That means that from here to here, or from here to here, is 4,000 feet across, and from the top part all the way down to the flattest part down there is about 600 feet deep. If you were standing here, it would look like you are on top of a mountain looking down there. And that's probably where the point of impact was, where the asteroid hit and it blew all of this other rock away. The opportunity for scientists to study such a crater is rare. One theory is that the crater was created by a meteor impact. After years of digging, scientists found fragments of space metals that proved that a meteorite was the cause of the crater. The area is now called Meteor Crater. Scientists and tourists can visit to learn more about meteors. In the beginning of this chapter, we talked about the environment of the Southwest and how this whole chapter, or this whole section, is about different ways that the Southwest is important to science. Inside this page, we just talked about how the Southwest dry climate has allowed for things like this, or things like staring into space, to be easier, to be helpful, because of the fact that its environment makes it so unique. Because there's not many people living in the desert, because there's not a huge town around this crater, it's definitely not as bothered, not as disturbed as places that have a lot of people living around it. And all of those things contribute to the global science community. Those all help scientists from around the world, not just in the United States, learn more about outer space. Page 284. Southwest Astronomy. Researchers use both old and new ways to look deep into the galaxy with telescopes. Observatories in the Southwest use huge telescopes to view planets and stars at incredible distances. These telescopes are long tubes with glass lenses and mirrors inside that collect light. With them, astronomers can view all parts of our solar system. Radio telescopes are another type of telescope. They collect radio waves that travel through space. These telescopes look like big bowls. Let's see if you can find an image that looks like a big bowl. Sometimes universities build and run their own observatories. There, students can work with their professors to learn about astronomy and add to the research of the scientific community. Oklahoma State University runs the H.S. Mendenhall Observatory near Stillwater, Oklahoma. The dark sides there make it a perfect spot to observe space. The University of Texas at Austin has the McDonald Observatory. Its large domes sit atop the Davis Mountains in western Texas. Its first telescope was built in 1933 and is still used today. So why do you think that they created these telescopes and these observatories? Because there definitely had to be a reason. And we just read through a lot of reasons for why these telescopes might be valuable. Once you've figured out why, you can definitely write on this page about who created those telescopes. So educators in the Southwest, astronomers, researchers in the Southwest would be your who. The problem would be not being able to see space clearly. And the solution would be creating telescopes, creating radio telescopes in order to see into space. So that's one. Observatories. Oh, and down here, let's read the caption. The dry, clean desert air and dark nights of the Southwest make it ideal for astronomical equipment. So astronomy is the study of the stars, and then astronomical is star studying equipment over here. Observatories. Kitt Peak National Observatory near Tucson, Arizona is located on the Tohono O'odham nation's land. It sits on a mountaintop high enough to provide a view through the very thin air. The observatory contains one of the most varied collections of telescopes in the world. There are 24 telescopes at Kitt Peak. Let's figure out which image it is. This one, it says Kitt Peak National Observatory. So this one is definitely a special spot because it has one of the few in the world, not even in the United States, in the whole world. Most of the telescopes gather data from the night sky, but one very large telescope works during the day. It looks at the sun through a slanted tunnel. The tunnel sends images to an underground lab. This solar telescope is the largest in the world. The Carl G. Jansky Very Large Array is a radio astronomy observatory in central New Mexico. It is made up of 27 antennas placed on tracks in a Y shape. Each antenna is 82 feet in diameter and is used to listen into space. The antennas work together as one powerful telescope that can use the sounds to create images of things very far away. We talked about bats and their echolocation and other adaptations of animals when we were talking about science. Radio waves are very similar to that in the sense that they will send out a signal, and based on when something comes back, so kind of like a bouncy ball, if you throw a bouncy ball at something very far, it might take a very long time for it to come back. But if you throw a bouncy ball at a wall that's very close, it will come back quickly. That's how radio waves are similar, in the sense that using sound waves, the same way that dolphins use sound waves, the same way that bats use sound waves, they'll send out a signal, and then from what bounces back, they can fill in a picture. Let's go to the next page. Visiting space. Modern space travel has its roots in the airplane manufacturing industry. In 1940, aircraft builders began to move to Texas. As more factories were built, other companies came to supply these businesses. In 1944, the U.S. Army built the Air Defense Center near El Paso, Texas. The aircraft and aerospace industries continued to grow. And you can see that one of the highlighted words is from your vocabulary for this chapter. So if you are unsure what that means, definitely go back and check in the beginning of this chapter's vocab. Space program in Houston. In 1961, the government looked for a place to establish a space control center. There were some requirements. The climate needed to be mild so that workers could be outside all year long. It needed a good water supply and a modern airport. Finally, it needed a pool of skilled labor. Houston had all of these things. The Johnson Space Center was born. Since 1955, Mission Control directs each space flight that involves astronauts. Workers keep in constant contact with the astronauts, ready to help if anything goes wrong. They provide an important link to Earth during these missions. So this is Mission Control in Houston, Texas. You might have seen it even in movies. They have other versions where they'll talk and they'll say reporting to Mission Control during space travel movies. This is usually what they're referring to if they're from the United States. Mission Control in Houston, Texas has monitored NASA's missions including rockets, space shuttles, and the International Space Station, ISS. ISS, or the International Space Station. One important project of the Johnson Space Center is the International Space Station. This spacecraft orbits Earth and allows researchers to live in it and conduct experiments that cannot be done anywhere else. Many countries cooperated to build and use the space station. The first piece of the station, a rocket built by Russia, was launched in 1988. More pieces were added until it was ready for its first crew in 2000. Oh, sorry, not 1988, 1998. This is the International Space Station, and it was built and maintained by multiple countries. So there's even astronauts from different parts of the world living together inside the space station. The station contains modules or units. Some modules are living quarters for the crew. Some are science labs. The labs are staffed by crews from the United States, Japan, Russia, Canada, and other countries in Europe. In Europe, 6 astronauts live there at a time. And other countries in Europe, and then it says 6 astronauts can live there at a time. The outer sides of the station contain solar arrays to collect energy from the sun. Robot arms attached to the outside of the station help astronauts move around in space, build new parts, and control equipment. Why do you think that other countries work together to build the International Space Station? Do you think that they created it just for one person to use, just for one country to use? Or do you think that the United States worked with other countries to create this space station so everyone could work together and use it as well? Do you think information like that would be important for everyone, or do you think only one country should have that information? And connecting back to the other page that we were working on, what could be a problem for them to create the International Space Station? What reason do you think that they created the International Space Station? Do you think that these projects could be done on Earth? Because inside this paragraph, it talks about how certain projects could definitely not be done anywhere else. So when you're going through here, if you want to put that as another who, scientists needed a place to perform projects. So you could put the who as scientist. The problem, there was nowhere on Earth that could do certain projects that needed to be done in space. And so the solution would be creating the International Space Station, where we still use it even today, to test different things that couldn't be done on Earth. So that is our second who, our second problem, and our second solution. Could even put countries. Countries needed a place. So many countries needed a place to perform scientific tests. The problem is that nowhere on Earth could be the same as space, because space is a completely different environment. And of course, yes, your solution would be that countries work together to create the International Space Station. Now let's read the words of another primary source, in this situation, Ronald Reagan. We want our friends to help us meet these challenges and share in their benefits. NASA will invite other countries to participate so we can strengthen peace, build prosperity, and expand freedom for all who share our goals. So he is inviting other countries to work together to help learn with each other in order to make better connections with them and learn from them, because no one has all of the information, and working together is usually the best way to get information accomplished. You can stop and check with yourself. Why do you think the Johnson Space Station was built in Houston? They talked about it over here. So make sure that you read through this paragraph again, or these paragraphs, I should say. And then when you're ready, you can get started on page 288. Biosphere II. The Southwest United States is home to a unique project near Tucson, Arizona. This project is called Biosphere II. It looks into establishing colonies in space. What do you guys know about something happening in space and maybe moving into space? We have information that they're still trying to learn. So see if you can think of anything today that might have information like that. These colonies do not need to be resupplied with food, water, or oxygen from Earth. Earth itself is called Biosphere I. A biosphere is part of a planet where life exists. The vision. Biosphere II was designed as a terrarium, or an enclosed glass structure. Finished in 1989, the three main sections. It has three main sections. Each end of the biosphere is pyramid shaped, and the center portion is rectangular. Inside are a desert, a rainforest, a grassland, a wetland, and an ocean. The technology area of the biosphere sits below ground. This space controls cooling, heating, and humidity. A living space for humans makes up the third biosphere. Outside are two large domes that provide the air for Biosphere II. A 200,000-gallon tank of water sits nearby. Biosphere II was built to be entirely closed off from the outside world. Everything that humans and other living things need to survive is located or produced inside. Scientists hope that by studying people in this environment, they would learn how to create colonies in outer space. So let's read the caption. Biosphere II was designed so scientists could research how people lived in a controlled environment. Why do you think they want to create a sample controlled environment based on the information we just read? Because that can be another problem. If we are trying to make something in space, if we're trying to create homes in space, then we need to test it out before we just send people to outer space, right? So scientists could be your who are trying to send people to space. The problem, we don't have enough information. We don't know what could happen if we send people to space without proper, maybe they need certain vitamins. Maybe they need to have a lot of Earth, and we don't have enough information. So the solution would be that they created Biosphere II in order to show what living in space could look like. It's not 100%, you know, something that we can say, yes, this is definitely how it'll be in space, but it is a possible way that they're trying to solve that issue by looking at how people live in a terrarium or in an environment that's closed off, not connected to the outside. So in that case, if you're using this, your who would be scientists. Your problem would be they're trying to send colonies to space, but we don't have enough information because no one else has done it before. And so the solution would be the creation of Biosphere II. Let's get started on the experiments. In the early 1990s, scientists planned their mission into Biosphere II. 4 women and 4 men sealed themselves off from the outside world. Could they survive without any outside influence? Time would tell. They spent most of their time growing food and tending animals. They kept detailed records on their food and oxygen mixture provided by the biosphere. They stayed inside for the entire 2-year period. Some changes were made and another mission began, but it was not successfully completed. Nevertheless, important information came out from both missions. Scientists learned about artificial ecosystems. They also studied about the behavior of crew members to know how to keep the future crews productive and happy. At the end, the experiments provided a wealth of data that helped NASA learn what future colonies in deep space might need to succeed. The same way that sometimes we don't get what we planned on, but we can still learn from it. That's what NASA did over here when it says that the second mission might not have been what they planned for, but they still learned from it. And using both pieces of information from the first experiment and the second experiment, they learned what they needed to learn about because they didn't even know where to begin. They didn't know where to start. They didn't know what type of information they needed to look for. But through learning from the successful mission and the unsuccessful mission, because both of them had information, they were able to gather new details about what another mission might need. Today, Biosphere II is run by the University of Arizona. The site still researches ecosystems and educates the public about Earth. No further crew experiments are planned at this site, but students can live there. Similar experiments have been performed in Antarctica and may continue in the future. So now we know that this site is no longer in use for that project, but in the future, maybe they're going to create another area where they can test and see if anything is similar to land in space. Let's go to the next page. Here we've got our states of the Southwest. So you would have chosen one of these states for your project, your TV show talking about special features or events of that state. Here we have Arizona. The year it became a state in 1912. It is called, the nickname is the Grand Canyon State, and their motto is God enriches. Their bird is the cactus wren. The animal, their state animal is the ring-tailed cat, which I assume is this one right here. Got your little rings. And its largest city is Phoenix, and its capital is also Phoenix. In class, we talked about how a phoenix is a mythical bird that bursts into flames when it dies and is reborn from those flames too. Phoenix is also one of the hottest, Arizona is also one of the hottest states, and Phoenix is definitely in the middle of it. Another state that we have in the Southwest is New Mexico. It became a state also in 1912. It is called the Land of Enchantment. And its motto, or its saying, or its phrase is, it grows as it goes. Its bird is the chaparral bird. The animal is the New Mexico black bear. The largest city is Albuquerque, and its capital is Santa Fe. Here we have Oklahoma. The year of its statehood, 1907. So this one became a state before New Mexico and Arizona. Its nickname is the Sooner State. The motto is labor conquers all things. The bird is the scissor-tailed flycatcher, right here. Its largest city, its state animal is buffalo. Its largest city is Oklahoma City. Its capital is also Oklahoma City. Then we have Texas. Texas became a state in 1845, so before all of these other states. Its nickname is the Lone Star State. Its motto is friendship. The bird is the northern mockingbird. The animal is the nine-banded armadillo, right here. And the animal is also, they have two animals. It's also the Texas Longhorn, which is a type of cow. Its largest city is Houston, and its capital is Austin. So all these dots right here are your capitals. For us, our capital is Sacramento. Now we have territories of the United States. Here we have American Samoa, which is off in the Pacific Ocean. It became a state in 1900, and the motto is Samoa, let God be first. The tree is the screw pine tree. The largest city is Pago Pago or Yafuna, and the capital is Pago Pago, and it is a group of islands. Another territory. So this is, territories are not necessarily states, but they are still part of the United States. As in, anyone that's born there is still a citizen, and a lot of these states, or not states, a lot of these territories are all over the world. They are not necessarily seen when it comes to voting. So it's not like how Arizona or California or other states have the ability to uh, connect to the US because they're not seen as part of the US, but they still are, even if they're on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. So American Samoa is an example of one. They're near the Philippines. Guam, also near that group of islands. The Northern Mariana Islands, I'm not sure where that one is, but if it is in Saipan, then that is below Malaysia. So the Northern Mariana Islands became a U.S. territory in 1944. Its bird is the Mariana fruit dove. Its largest city is Saipan, and the capital is Saipan. Guam is another territory of the United States. It became a U.S. territory in 1898. Its bird is the Guam rail. The largest city is Dededo, and its capital is unclear. I want to say it says Hagona, but I cannot read it. And then we have the U.S. Virgin Islands. The U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, or Puerto Rico in specific, became part of the United States when, I believe, during the Mexico War, where the U.S. fought for Cuba, it gained Puerto Rico, and at the time, Cuba was owned by, or not Cuba, but at the time the U.S. was fighting against the Southwest, or fighting against Spain, and that's how they gained Puerto Rico. It became a U.S. territory in 1898. Its nickname is the Isle of Enchantment. The motto is John is his name. The bird is the Puerto Rican woodpecker. The animal is the cocoy frog. The largest city is San Juan. The capital is San Juan. And the U.S. Virgin Islands is actually more than one group of islands. It became a U.S. territory in 1917. Its motto is United in Pride and Hope. Its bird is the banana squid. And the largest city is Charlotte-Amalie. And the capital is also Charlotte-Amalie. So even though the Southwest is connected to the United States, these territories are not. These are all in different parts of the world. In a second, I'll show you guys a map showing exactly where the different territories are, because they're not really connected to the Southwest, but they're put alongside the Southwest. All right, so here we have an image of the United States territories. Here we have the Hawaiian Islands, which were originally not a state, but they were a territory until the Queen was overthrown by the United States government. Here we have the Midway Islands, so not too far off. We have the Johnson Atoll. All of these territories are pretty much island, small islands. American Samoa is down here. This is Australia, by the way. And down here is New Zealand. Here is Guam. Here's the Northern Mariana Islands, Wake Island, Howland Island, and then over here is Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Here's Florida. So Jamaica and all of the other there's a bunch of other smaller countries here. This is where the Puerto Rico and them are. This feels a little bit further off, but it's somewhere below Florida, next to the Bermuda Triangle. The only thing that's missing from this map is actually Saipan. But other than that, all of these tiny islands they do not hold the same rights as regular states. And some of them are trying to become states. I believe Puerto Rico is one of the territories trying to become its own state. Hawaii is another one. And the people that live there presently, some of them want to remain as part of the United States, and some of them don't, because these territories were created so long ago that the people in them might not want to be part of the United States. So let's get back to our discussion of the Southwest. Okay, so this is the last page before the end of chapter 5. We're going to talk about the essential question, which is the question that we started in the beginning of the chapter. And the essential question which we had was, how does the Southwest reflect its diverse past and unique environment? So diverse, we're talking about the fact that there are multiple histories, multiple people, multiple groups living in that same area. Unique environment, it's special environment. So how does the Southwest show its diverse past and unique environment? You're going to be using the information that we read as well as your own research to finish your chapter 5 project, which I'll show you in a second. And we'll go over the last 2 pages of your workbook pages. Don't forget to that we're going to be looking for ways that the environment show the past and the present, because we don't just talk about history and not talk about how it has connections to today. History is always connecting to today's information. And when you present your project, you're going to be sharing your ideas with your class. So let's answer the last couple of questions, and then we'll go over the project. So here we filled out 3 already for 3 who's and 3 solutions and 3 problems. If you're looking for another problem, then make sure that you go through the chapter. For our options, we had the biosphere, we had visiting space. When we talked about why they wanted to create a space program in Houston, one of the things that they were looking for, these are some of the requirements. The climate needed to be mild so workers could be outside all year long. It had to have a good water supply, and it had to have skilled labor, which means people that were people that knew how to do the jobs. So if you're looking for a who, then you could say the government in 1961, the United States government in 1961, and would be your who. Your problem would be that they are trying to create a space program in Houston, or space program, and the solution with the problem also saying that they needed workers, they needed a good environment, they needed a water supply, and so their solution was to use Houston, Texas as their base, because that area met all of their requirements, had all of those things. We already talked about the International Space Station and how that was definitely a problem, that they couldn't do experiments on Earth that needed to be done in space, because Earth's environment is different from space's environment. And so the way that they solved that problem was by working together with other countries. We talked about scientists creating, or researchers creating, different ways to look into space by creating their own observatories or their own telescopes, working together with other scientists. And then you can also look at the beginning of the let's see, of this lesson, where we talk about the space race and how John F. Kennedy had the problem of wanting to compete with the Soviet Union as a country, the United States and the Soviet Union competing for who would reach the moon first. So that could be your 5th one. For who would be John F. Kennedy or the US government, and the problem would be that they wanted to compete in the space race, and the solution would be that scientists created, or branches of government were created, and everyone worked together to help launch one of the first rockets into space. So make sure that you have this all filled out. If you're not sure, use your resources. We have the Southwest, we've got all these pages, we read them. Make sure that you show that you read them and you put them into your own words. We do not copy directly from the text. We try to figure out what it means. We try to summarize it. We try to use our words to make sure that the information that we're sharing, we understand it in order to put it on a page. When you're done with that, you can go ahead and get started on page 238. Here, we're going to be, again, writing and citing evidence. The question that it's asking for you to do is, how did the environment and other factors contribute to the space industry in the Southwest? What major accomplishment in space exploration happened in the Southwest? Use evidence from your text to explain your answer. So during this whole chapter, we've talked repeatedly about why the Southwest is special. When we say special, what made their environment different than other places? We talked about the crater. We've talked about how in the Southwest, because it doesn't have, it does have huge deserts, and because there's not as many people living, it's not as, as crowded. That's definitely things that play into why the Southwest is so great for space exploration, for studying space. In one of the paragraphs, we talked about how without that many people living nearby, there's not as much light pollution. The desert is clean, the air is clean. You don't have to worry about lots of houses lighting up the sky and causing it to be harder for scientists to see into space. The dry environment helped create the Biosphere II. That's another thing that happened in the Southwest. In Houston, Texas, where they have the headquarters, that is another feature that was helpful because of the fact that it had huge open spaces. Even for in the beginning of this chapter, it was saying that that area was good, and we were talking about why that area was a perfect spot, because it had clear spaces. There was not going to be much snow in comparison to maybe another state that has a lot of rain. Do you think that that would be ideal for for planes that are trying to land, or for ships that are trying to take off? Do you think that they would want the floor to be slippery? So make sure that if you are talking about, the environment of the Southwest, if you're talking about the heat, if you're talking about the clarity of the sky, if you're talking about the environment of the Earth, you're talking about the crater, all of those things, you mention them, and make sure that you show it in your answers. Make sure that you show where you got it from. You can say, in the text, I read that certain areas had better, were better for nighttime viewing of the sky. Or you can say, because of the dry heat, it was good for trying to learn what it would be like living in space. All of those things are things you can mention here. When it talks about major accomplishments in space exploration happened in the Southwest, it's talking about how in the Southwest we have multiple areas where there were where things happened. So launching the Apollo 11, where they created the Lyndon B. Johnson the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center. All of those things are parts of space exploration in the Southwest. For this page, it's asking you to summarize the role of space exploration in the Southwest to reflect its unique environment. So when it says summarize, it wants you to put it into your own words. Same thing as what you were doing over here with writing and citing evidence, writing it in your own words. You're going to be doing the same thing here. The only difference is what it's asking you to summarize. So it says the role. how does the part of space exploration in the Southwest reflect or show its unique environment? When we were talking about how the Southwest was ideal for its clear skies, or its space stations, or not space stations, but areas for spaceships to take off from. All of those things are part of the Southwest and talks about its environment. They don't have extreme cold, or they might have heat, but they won't have as much rain. And if you're working with machinery, or if you're working with creation of things outside, you don't have to worry about the rain coming and messing up your projects as much. So when you're summarizing, make sure that you explain using the information that we read inside the text, talking about how the environment here, even it says right here, the climate needed to be mild so workers could work outside all year. That can be one. If you were going to say that Biosphere II had a similar environment to what scientists think space could be like. Not even 100% sure at the time, but what they thought it could be like, to learn more about what living in space could look like. That's another impact of their space exploration studies for the Southwest. And when you're done with that, we will go over the project requirements. Here we have the inquiry project. It's the same standards as the beginning of the chapter. We'll go over those two after this, but it's asking you essentially for the same thing. You have to complete your TV show description. That was one of the requirements. Describe your TV show. You have to check that the show description reflects a unique part of the Southwest. So that means it has to have key events, talking about important events, talking about important people that lived in that area, geography, and time period. So if you are talking about maybe someone famous from that area, you can have that as your people. If you're talking about the geography, you want to talk about the different ways that land is in comparison to the rest of the United States, you can do that too. If you want to talk about specific time period, in the previous lesson, you were learning about the Cowboys or and other groups, you could have that as well. Key events, so important things that happened. And then, of course, make sure you finish any visuals to go along with your TV show. And you can practice at home before you present it, so that way when you come in class and present it, then you're ready to go. So make sure that you review this checklist, and you review the checklist at the beginning of the chapter in order to get the full points. Let's check out the beginning of the chapter. And it's essentially the same information. You would be choosing a time period in the Southwest. You're going to be researching for events, climate, and other things that happen in this location. You would choose a name, of course. Can't have a TV show without a name. And of course, your visuals. So all of these things are things that you would get to choose, and you can present it on Google Slides, or if you want to present it on a poster board, or something that will allow you to have visuals, that's okay too. Just make sure that it is uploaded on Google Classroom, so that way we can present it in class. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson.